Welcome to the video, everybody. It is August 4th, 2026, and I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what Ukraine just pulled off changes this entire war. Not on the front line, not with tanks, not with artillery, with a $55,000 drone that just flew 3,000 kilometers into the heart of Siberia and blew up the single most important piece of oil infrastructure that Vladimir Putin owns. The Omsk refinery, Russia's largest, is now offline. Smoke still rising, and it is not the only one. Because in the same campaign, Ukraine hit the Ryazan refinery, just 120 kilometers from Moscow, and the Kstovo refinery, Russia's second largest gasoline producer. 3 refineries, 3 surgical strikes. And according to Ukraine's General Staff, 42, 7% of Russia's entire designed oil refining capacity is now offline or severely degraded. That number came straight from Ukraine's General Staff, confirmed by Energy Aspects data cited by Bloomberg. This is not a skirmish. This is economic warfare executed with the precision of a fighter jet and the cost of a used car. Stay right here, because I'm going to walk you through every single detail of how they did it, why it works, and exactly what it means for Putin's ability to keep this war running. Now, before we get into the full breakdown, I want you to understand one thing right up front. Russia's ability to fund this war is built on one foundation: oil. According to Russia's own finance ministry data, oil and gas revenue exceeded 25% of total federal fiscal income in 2025. Goldman Sachs analysis shows that Russia's oil export revenues, measured in rubles, had already plunged 50% from their peak, falling from the equivalent of 6% of GDP all the way down to 7%. And now, with these 3 refineries down, that floor just dropped out completely. So when I tell you Ukraine just struck the 3 deepest refineries that fund Putin's war effort, I'm not being dramatic. I'm reading you the budget numbers. But here's the thing that nobody is connecting yet. Ukraine didn't just hit 3 refineries at random. This was a sequenced, deliberate, strategic campaign. The deepest, the closest to Moscow, and the second largest gasoline producer in the country. All 3 legs of the stool that keeps Putin's domestic fuel supply running, gone. And I'm going to show you exactly how each one went down. But first, let me tell you about the weapon that made this entire thing possible, because it is one of the most impressive pieces of technology to come out of this war, and most people have no idea it even exists. It is called the FP1. It was designed and built entirely in Ukraine by a company called Firepoint. According to Wikipedia's Firepoint FP1 entry, and confirmed by multiple defense publications, the drone costs approximately $55,000 per unit. It carries a modular warhead between 60 and 120 kilograms. It is constructed with radar-absorbent materials, meaning it is very difficult to detect on Russian air defense radar. It has a 2-cylinder engine, a fixed-wing design with a wingspan of 6 meters, and it is launched via a solid rocket booster, meaning it needs no runway and no prep time at a traditional airfield. The original design had a range of 1,600 kilometers. But for the Omsk strike, the deepest strike, Ukrainian manufacturer Firepoint unveiled an upgraded wing incorporating an additional integrated fuel tank. According to Ukrainska Pravda, reporting on the Eurosatory 2026 defense exhibition in Paris, that upgrade pushed the FP1's range up to 2,700 kilometers and, in subsequent versions confirmed by Firepoint themselves, up to 3,400 kilometers. That is Siberia range. That means no Russian refinery east of Moscow is safe anymore. And Russia built those facilities deep inside their own country specifically because they thought the distance would protect them. The distance was never the problem. The distance was just a door. Ukraine just walked right through it. And here's the math on what that means financially. Ukraine's General Staff confirmed that since the beginning of 2026 alone, drones have attacked Russian refineries at least 194 times. That is confirmed by Energy Newsbeat, reporting citing Ukraine's General Staff figures. Before the Omsk strike on July 6th, Ukraine had already hit every one of Russia's 11 largest oil refineries except Omsk. According to United 24 Media, citing the General Staff, Omsk was the last geographic sanctuary. When Omsk fell, Zelensky went public and said, and I'm paraphrasing his words here because of copyright, that the very concept of strategic depth as one of the Kremlin's key advantages no longer fully reflects reality. He was right. Let me tell you why. So let's walk through each of these 3 refineries in the order they matter most, starting with the deepest. Omsk, July 6th, 2026. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, the SSO, launched upgraded FP1 long-range drones from Ukrainian-held territory. Those drones flew approximately 3,000 kilometers. That is confirmed by the SSO's own telegram statement reported by Kyiv Post, to reach the Gazprom Neft-operated Omsk oil refinery in western Siberia. This is the first time in the entire war that a Ukrainian weapon launched from Ukrainian territory reached Omsk. And what is Omsk? Let me give you the numbers. According to the Kiev Independent and confirmed by Reuters, the Omsk refinery processes more than 21 million metric tons of crude oil per year. That is roughly 10% of Russia's entire national refining capacity in a single facility. It supplies more than half of the entire Siberian Federal District's motor fuel demand. When that plant goes down, Siberia runs out of gas. Not metaphorically, literally. And here's what happened when the drones arrived. According to satellite imagery obtained by Militarny and the Xilanova Plus Telegram channel, confirmed using Maxar commercial satellite data, 4 FP-1 drones struck the ALOU AVT-11 primary crude oil processing unit, the plant's most critical installation. Ukraine's general staff stated its design capacity at 4 million metric tons of crude per year. Dnipro-OSINT analysts confirmed the ALOU AVT-11 accounts for approximately 40% of the Omsk refinery's total production capacity. Then, according to Reuters, citing 2 industry sources reported by both Kyiv Post and United 24 Media, the strike also forced the shutdown of CDU-10, which accounts for 38% of the plant's capacity, and triggered the cascade failure of CDU-11, which provides another 37%. Not directly hit, but the blast destroyed the network connections required for its operation. Do the math on that. You've just eliminated roughly 75% of the operational capacity of Russia's single largest refinery. One night, 4 drones, $220,000 worth of hardware. Russia's presidential representative to Siberia, Anatoly Seryshev, confirmed the damage publicly in a statement reported by Ukrainska Pravda and United 24 Media. He said, and I'm paraphrasing because I never quote verbatim, that facilities at the Omsk oil refinery were damaged, no personnel were injured, and that damage assessment and repair work had been organized. What he didn't say was when it would come back online. Reuters, citing those same 2 industry sources, said the plant had halted crude processing entirely following the strike, and the Omsk city gas station chain Topline immediately suspended gasoline sales to private customers, restricting fuel only to fleet vehicles with fuel cards. You think Putin wanted that on the evening news in Siberia? No, but there it was. Now, let's talk about the second refinery, Ryazan. This one hits differently, and I mean that literally, because this is the refinery that feeds Moscow. The Rosneft-owned Ryazan oil refinery sits approximately 120 kilometers southeast of the Russian capital and is one of 3 refineries that supply Moscow via product pipelines. According to Tech Times, citing energy aspects and Bloomberg data, it has an annual crude processing capacity of roughly 1 million metric tons. That's about 343,000 barrels per day and accounts for roughly 5% of Russia's total national refining output. The other 2 refineries in that Moscow supply chain are Yaroslavl and Kstovo. Ukraine hit all 3, but Ryazan got hit the hardest and the most repeatedly. According to Euromaidan Press, the facility was struck on 15th of May 2026, igniting vacuum distillation units. Residents of Ryazan city woke up to sticky black oil droplets coating their parked cars and apartment windows. That strike forced a complete operational shutdown. And according to new Eurasian Strategy Center's published analysis, the Ryazan refinery has not resumed exchange sales since that May 15th strike, a prolonged shutdown of over 2 months. Then Ukraine hit it again on July the 29th, 2026. According to Reuters, cited by Ukrainska Pravda and Bloomberg, the refinery stopped operations on July 29th, and the shutdown was expected to last up to 2 weeks. And that is accounting for the restart time required to bring primary and secondary processing units back online and re-establish product quality standards after an unplanned emergency shutdown. Meanwhile, according to Riddle Russia, an independent analytical publication, the Moscow refinery in the Kapotnya district of the capital is not expected to resume production until early 2027. You now have the refinery that feeds Moscow offline until 2027, and the one 120 kilometers down the road getting hit again in late July. Moscow's gas stations are watching this very carefully. And now let's get into the third refinery, Kstovo, the Lukoil Nizhegorod Nefteorg Syntez facility, also called Norsy, sits near Nizhny Novgorod. According to United 24 Media, citing Ukraine's general staff, it has a processing capacity of 17 million tons per year, including more than 8 million tons of gasoline annually, making it Russia's second largest gasoline producer. It was struck on July the 2nd, 2026. According to the Kiev Post and United 24 Media, the July 2nd strike caused the refinery to lose more than half of its total production capacity. Half, in one night. The Kstovo refinery had already been struck multiple times throughout 2026, but the July 2nd strike was the decisive blow, according to the reporting. And then there was also the Tyumen Antipinsky refinery in western Siberia, struck July the 25th, 2026, more than 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine's border, according to Energy Newsbeat, and confirmed by President Zelensky publicly. Fires engulfed a diesel fuel cleaning unit, and Zelensky confirmed the overnight strike in a broader package that also hit a weapons manufacturing facility in Kirov, logistics infrastructure in Yekaterinburg, and fuel depots in Rostov-on-Don. Now, I'm going to show you the impact this campaign is having right now on Russia's ability to keep this war going, because the numbers that have come out of verified data sources in the last few weeks are extraordinary. According to Energy Aspects data cited by Bloomberg and reported by Yahoo Finance, Russian refineries were processing an average of 391 million barrels of crude per day in early July 2026. That is the lowest national processing rate since March 2005, a 21-year low. That is confirmed. That came from independent energy analytics firm Energy Aspects, not from Ukraine. More than 4 million barrels per day below the previous year's average. And according to the Kiev School of Economics Institute's July 2026 Russian oil tracker, a detailed publicly available monthly report, oil product exports fell 1% to approximately 6 million barrels per day, the lowest level ever recorded. Meanwhile, Russia's oil export revenues fell by $5 billion in a single month to $8 billion total. According to the same KSE report, Russia banned diesel and gas oil exports in July 2026, potentially putting up to 36% of its total oil product export volumes at risk of evaporating. Russia, the world's second largest diesel exporter after the United States, banned diesel exports because Ukraine had wrecked enough of its refineries that it needed every barrel it could squeeze out to keep its own country running. And inside Russia, according to Wikipedia's 2025 to 2026 Russian fuel crisis article, which aggregates multiple verified Russian and international media sources, 2/3 of Russia's regions were reporting fuel supply issues by the summer. 6 regions introduced an alternating license plate rotation system where drivers could only buy gasoline on even or odd days depending on their license plate number. Gas stations in multiple regions were shutting down because antitrust restrictions prevented them from raising prices high enough to profit. Crimea declared a state of emergency and banned all fuel sales entirely. The Financial Times reported Russia was producing 1 million barrels per day in June 2026, 28% below the 5-year average and 35% below design capacity. Finnish President Alexander Stubb said publicly in early July 2026 that Russia's capacity to produce and export oil had been reduced by 40% due to Ukrainian mid- and long-range drone strikes. 40%? That's not Zelensky saying that. That's the president of Finland saying that in July 2026. And here's the part that ties all of this directly to the war machine itself. Russia's war in Ukraine runs on 3 things simultaneously: soldiers, weapons, and money. The money comes from oil. According to Russia's finance ministry data reviewed by Euromaidan Press, oil and gas revenue in January through May 2026 was 98 trillion rubles. That's approximately $39 billion. And that was already down 8% from the same period the previous year. Russia's 2026 budget projected a full-year federal deficit of 8 trillion rubles. But according to the same finance ministry data, the deficit had already reached 6 trillion rubles by the end of May. That is nearly double the projected deficit in 5 months. And according to the Center for Eastern Studies' published analysis on Russia's 2026 budget, the Kremlin already announced a reduction in national defense funding for the first time since the full-scale invasion began. They raised their VAT tax from 20% to 22%. They are cutting civilian programs and borrowing to keep the budget from coming apart. And all of this happened before the full summer drone campaign really hit its stride. Now, I want to give you a quick word from the guys that are helping me keep this channel going, because the only reason I'm able to do deep research and put this kind of analysis out every single day is because of the incredible community that has supported the books and the platforms. My new book, The Art of Modern War, fills in everything that I don't have time to cover in these daily breakdowns. The drone campaign against Russian oil infrastructure is one of the most sophisticated economic warfare operations in modern military history, and I've got an entire chapter on what economic targeting looks like when it's done right, going all the way back to the decisions that shaped outcomes in the Second World War, up to exactly what we're watching happen in Russia right now. You can pre-order it, signed or unsigned, right now at mabbook.com. That link is in the description. Guys, seriously, your support with the book is something I don't take lightly. Thank you. But let's get back to the mechanics of how Ukraine pulled this off, because this is the part that even defense analysts are still wrapping their heads around. Because everyone who built the conventional wisdom around this war said Ukraine could never reach Siberia. Russia's planners built those refineries deep inland specifically because they believed the distance created safety. Omsk was over 2,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Tyumen hit on July 25th was more than 2,000 kilometers away. This is the same strategic logic that led Russia to think the facilities were untouchable without Western long-range missiles, which Ukraine never received authorization to use on Russian soil. So Ukraine built their own answer to that problem. The FP-1 drone was produced in numbers that the West initially dismissed as unscalable, but according to Global Military's published specifications database and confirmed by multiple Ukrainian defense publications, Firepoint went from producing 30 FP-1 units per day in early 2025 to over 100 units per day by mid-2025. Total production exceeded 5,000 units. At $55,000 each, a swarm of 10 drones cost Russia roughly the same as one barrel of Urals crude times $550,000 in damage to critical infrastructure. And that's a conservative estimate. The ratio of investment to destruction is so lopsided that Russia simply cannot repair facilities faster than Ukraine can hit them. And that, according to independent oil and gas analyst Boris Ehrenstein, quoted by Euromaidan Press, is precisely the point. He said publicly that the size, coordination, and repeated waves of the drones make it impossible for Russia to repair the refineries before the next attack occurs. The repair crews are racing against a weapon that costs less than a luxury car and can fly to Siberia. That is the asymmetric trap Ukraine has set. Now, Russia's air defense has tried to respond. The Omsk governor, Vitaly Kotsenko, admitted publicly, confirmed by the Moscow Times and CNBC, that several drones broke through layers of Russian air defense and hit the refinery. Several. Out of however many were launched, the air defense shot some down, some got through. And the ones that got through were enough to put the country's largest refinery offline. Think about that from an air defense commander's perspective. You can intercept 80% of the incoming drones and still lose the fight because the 20% that survive the intercept can destroy a facility worth billions of dollars in strategic output. Russia's air defense is designed to protect military assets. It was never optimized to protect a sprawling industrial refinery complex from small, radar-absorbent, low-flying drones that look like noise to the enemy's detection systems. That is why the LO Avity-11 unit at Omsk burned. And here's what makes the strategic picture complete. Ukraine is not just hitting the refineries that make the money. They are hitting the refineries that directly supply fuel to the Russian military. According to Ukraine's General Staff statement, cited by Kyiv Independent and multiple reports, Kyiv considers energy facilities to be valid military targets, specifically because they provide fuel and funding for the Kremlin's war machine. Ryazan produces aviation fuel, diesel, gasoline, aviation kerosene. Those products don't just go into civilian cars. They go into Russian military aircraft, armored vehicles, and logistics convoys trying to supply the front. When Ryazan goes offline, Russian military planners are not just worried about Muscovites waiting in fuel lines. They are worried about whether their forward-deployed tanks and attack helicopters have enough fuel to execute offensive operations. You don't advertise that vulnerability on Russian state television. But it is there. That brings us to the global roundup section, everybody. Let me run through what else is happening around the world right now, because there are a couple of things that are connecting to this story in ways most people aren't tracking. First, on the Russia-Ukraine front line, Russia announced its intention to expand offensive operations into 2 additional Ukrainian regions. Ukraine's response, and this is a direct counter-pressure move, is the Shadow Fleet campaign in the Sea of Azov. According to multiple open-source tracking reports, Ukraine's 4-day Sea of Azov campaign extended into a multi-week effort that hit over 36 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers. Those Shadow Fleet tankers are the mechanism by which Russia moves oil it can't move through sanctioned Western maritime routes. They are old, they are uninsured, they are often crewed by people who know they are operating illegally, and Ukraine is systematically eliminating them. According to the Kyiv School of Economics, a Russian oil tracker for July 2026, approximately 94% of Russia's Shadow Fleet tankers used for export are over 15 years old. The EU, under its 21st sanctions package, added another 30 oil tankers to the sanctions list as of July 27, 2026. The US, UK, EU, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand have collectively sanctioned 681 unique oil tankers as of that date. So Ukraine is destroying the refineries on one end, the West is sanctioning the delivery mechanism on the other end, and Russia is caught in the middle trying to export oil it literally cannot refine into products. It cannot move on ships it can no longer use. That is a comprehensive economic siege. Second thing in the roundup, Romania. NATO's eastern flank is getting a lot more active than Western media is reporting. Romanian F-16s have shot down multiple unidentified drones over Romanian territorial waters in recent weeks. The drones were subsequently identified as Shahed-type munitions. the same model that Russia co-developed with Iran and has used extensively throughout this war. That matters here because it connects directly to the escalation dynamics on Russia's western flank. Russia is losing economic ground to Ukraine's refinery campaign, losing military reach on its western approaches as NATO partners get more aggressive about protecting their own airspace, and burning through foreign currency reserves faster than its remaining oil revenues can replace them. Third thing, the fuel crisis inside Russia is starting to affect more than just civilian mobility. According to the Wikipedia article on the 2025 to 2026 Russian fuel crisis, which aggregates verified Russian and international sources including Medusa, the Moscow Times, Reuters, and Politico, the Kremlin was actively considering lowering the standards of diesel production to Euro 2, a fuel standard that had been banned inside Russia since 2013. Think about what that tells you. They are talking about producing lower quality diesel because they can't produce enough of the good stuff. That is the kind of desperation decision that happens when a country's refining infrastructure is being systematically dismantled from the outside. And that brings us to the 40 chest strategic analysis section, my friends. Because here's the piece that everyone is missing when they look at this drone campaign. The conventional analysis of the Ukraine-Russia war has always been framed in terms of territory. Who holds what village? Who advanced 3 kilometers? Who retreated? But what Ukraine figured out and executed brilliantly across 2025 and 2026 is that the war is also being fought on a second front that nobody can watch on a live map, the financial front. And on the financial front, Ukraine is winning. Here is the strategic architecture of what they built. Russia funds its military from oil revenue. Oil revenue flows when refineries convert crude into exportable, sellable products. Diesel, gasoline, aviation fuel, petrochemical feedstock. The crude itself is worth less without refinement. According to the Kiev School of Economics Russian oil tracker, oil product exports, meaning refined products, fell 1% to a record low of 6 million barrels per day in June 2026. Crude exports went up slightly. Why? Because Russia can no longer refine enough of its crude domestically. It is being forced to ship raw crude instead of higher value refined products. The price differential between selling a barrel of crude and selling a barrel of diesel is significant. Russia is getting less money per barrel it exports because Ukraine destroyed the facilities that added value to those barrels. And it gets worse for the Kremlin. Russia's federal deficit reached 6 trillion rubles by the end of May, nearly double the projected 8 trillion full-year number, according to Finance Ministry data reviewed by Euromaidan Press. The government has already cut defense spending for the first time since the invasion. They raised taxes. They are borrowing. And the summer drone campaign, which intensified in June and July 2026 with 6 attacks on refineries in the first 10 days of July alone, according to the ins.press analysis, has only accelerated all of those trends. Independent analyst Boris Ehrenstein told Euromaidan Press directly that Ukraine's strikes have created the most severe fuel crisis in recent years, and that the coordination makes it impossible for Russia to repair before the next attack lands. That is not a recoverable situation on a short timeline. Now, some people are going to say, okay, but Russia can import refined products from China or India, and they can, to a point. But here's the problem. The scale of what has been destroyed is massive. 42. 7% of design national refining capacity is offline or degraded. According to the Financial Times data cited by the Wikipedia fuel crisis article, Russia produced 1 million barrels per day in June 2026, 35% below design capacity. You cannot replace 35% of your national refining output with spot imports from China on short notice. The logistics don't work. The pipeline infrastructure is built to move domestically refined product outward, not to bring foreign refined product inward at scale. Russia is a net exporter of refined products. Its entire supply chain is oriented outward. Reversing that infrastructure to absorb replacement imports would take years and billions of dollars in capital investment. Ukraine has already hit the next facilities before the current ones are even repaired. What Ukraine has done is prove a military doctrine that, frankly, the U.S. Air Force has been studying for decades, but has never executed at this scale with weapons this cheap. Economic targeting. Degrade the enemy's financial engine, not just its battlefield assets. Hit the fuel system that powers the tanks, the planes, the ships, and the artillery simultaneously, not through direct engagement, but through economic strangulation. Every Russian soldier on the front line right now is consuming fuel that flows from a refinery. The fewer refineries that are working, the shorter the operational reach of that soldier becomes. Every Russian armored vehicle needs diesel. Every Russian helicopter needs aviation kerosene. Ryazan made aviation kerosene. Ryazan is offline. And Putin cannot publicly acknowledge how bad this is getting without shattering the narrative that Russia is winning and that sanctions aren't working and that the war is going according to plan. So instead, you get Kremlin spokespeople talking about restarting mothballed refinery units, CDU-7 and CDU-8 at Omsk, each capable of processing only 10,000 metric tons of crude per day, according to Reuters, which is a fraction of the capacity that was just destroyed. You get alternating license plate fuel rationing in 6 regions. You get Crimea's state of emergency and full ban on fuel sales. None of that is what you say publicly when you're running a war from a position of strength. Zelensky's stated strategic goal throughout this campaign, confirmed across multiple public statements, has been to bring Putin to a real negotiating table. Not a table where Russia stalls while it rearms and rebuilds, but a table where Russia is forced to negotiate because the domestic pain of continuing the war is too high to politically sustain. That strategy depends on 2 things working simultaneously: making the war too expensive militarily and making it too expensive economically. The refinery campaign is the economic lever. And as of this video, Ukraine has just confirmed publicly that every one of Russia's 11 largest oil refineries has been struck. That is not a campaign that is winding down. That is a campaign that has achieved its initial objectives and is now continuing into sustained pressure. What do you think happens next, guys? Do you think Putin bends toward real negotiations as the fuel crisis deepens? Or does he try to absorb the pain and keep pushing, hoping Ukraine runs out of FP1 drones before Russia runs out of patience? Let me know in the comments below. Because I've had these conversations in the live streams, and the community is genuinely split on this one. Some people think the economic pressure is now severe enough to produce a shift. Others think the Kremlin will nationalize whatever fuel stocks remain, prioritize military supply chains, and let the civilian population absorb the shortage. Both of those scenarios have precedence in how authoritarian governments handle economic siege conditions, and I'd love to hear where you land on this. Go ahead and sign up for my email list at maxafterburnerenergy.com. That's where I push out breaking content, updates before they hit the channel, and you'll find all of our merch and energy drinks there too. It's completely free to sign up. Link is in the description. And if you want the deeper framework on everything that's happening, not just the daily breakdown, but the full picture of how economic warfare and military targeting strategy interact, my book, The Art of Modern War, is available for pre-order right now, signed or unsigned at mabook.com. Link is also in the description. Your support on that book is what keeps this research depth level sustainable, and I genuinely appreciate every one of you who has already grabbed a copy. And follow me on X and on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every single day with real-time updates, additional analysis, and things that don't always make it into the videos. Click the link in the description. Join the Max Ready Room. I do priority. Replies for members in the live streams, and I'm running those live streams almost daily at this point. So come hang out over there. And then go ahead and watch this next video that pops up right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing out.